We are talking about witness tonight, and you may wonder, well, what's witness got to do, if you've been here the last couple of months, what's witness got to do with these contemplative practices that we have been looking at as a church in order to take us deeper in our faith? So if you haven't been around the last couple of weeks, we're talking about the spiritual wall and what it takes to break through to a deeper level of your Christian faith. And we've been talking about reading your scripture, we've been talking about Sabbath, we've been talking about community, reading your Bible and praying and contemplating God. What has sharing your faith got to do about that? I wonder, let me grab your imagination for a moment. In fact, let me ask you to do this. Think about what you do mostly during the week. So if you study, think about yourself at university. If you work, think about yourself at work. If you're mostly involved around the house or you're doing something in the community, think about yourself there. And just grab that thought now, put that in your mind. And now think about someone there that doesn't necessarily come to church, isn't necessarily a Christian. Just think about who that person is and think about the name of that person. Now I want you to imagine what it would be like for you to share with them as boisterously, as loudly as what we've just done in terms of singing these songs about Jesus. Can you imagine what it'd be like if you turned to them and said to them, "Let me tell you about Jesus"? Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine what their reaction might be? This is the thing about witness and about all the other spiritual practices. The one that you are going to find the hardest and the one that isn't what we might call in your wheelhouse. So some of you are like, "Mate, praying for me, I just do that. I love to pray. Or I love to read the Bible, or I love to be at Bible study in community with other people. I love to, be involved in all these things." I just go to that straight away. If witnessing is not in that wheelhouse, if it's not something that you're jumping up and down doing just naturally, it may very well be the one little part of that wheel that's going to propel you deeper and further in your Christian faith. The one practice that you're not doing, that you're not naturally drawn to, may very well be unlocking the key to what it means to be deeper in your faith. Let me tell you why. When you're praying by yourself, no one's around, and you're talking to God, and it's not like some prayer maybe that's been written down. It's just you're pouring out your heart to God. You're saying, "God, I really need this. God, you are there. Listen to me." You're actually sort of like observing yourself doing that prayer, and you're thinking to yourself, "I really believe this." Or you're reading your Bible and you're getting something deep out of it, and that sense that God is with you and speaking to you. Your heart says to your own heart, "Oh, this is real. I truly believe this." There's no one watching you. There's no one ticking the box. There's no one saying, "I've turned up to church," or "I've turned up here." You're not doing it for anyone else. When you're just doing it between you and God, you know it's real. You're not lying to yourself. Your heart is speaking to your own heart. Can you imagine yourself sharing your faith with someone, telling them about Jesus? What that says to you about you. What it says to you about you is that you are willing to take a relational risk, because there is absolutely a risk in sharing your faith. There is a relational risk. You put the friendship, the work relationship, the university relationship, even the family relationship, you put that at risk when you share your faith with someone. If you're willing to take that risk, it tells you something about you. It tells you that you actually think it is good news. It tells you that you actually think, "I need to share this." It actually takes you deeper in your faith because you start to understand something about yourself. This is real for me. this is actually important. I truly believe me sharing my faith is actually going to help someone. So when we talk about a program like Alpha, which is an incredible program, and the incredible thing about Alpha is hundreds of thousands of people right now are becoming Christians through that program. It's incredible what they're doing. That's a great program. I'm not talking about a program. I'm not talking about Billy Graham coming to Melbourne in the 50s and 100,000 people at the MCG, whatever, and a stack of people becoming Christians through some incredible evangelist. That is amazing, and God did that. What I'm talking about is your own spiritual walk and your own spiritual journey, you sharing your faith with someone. What does that look like? What does that feel like for you? Can you imagine that? In the book of Daniel, we have the story of young Daniel who's taken off in captivity to Babylon. And I'm just going to skim through some of the key verses in Daniel chapter 1. During the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered his chief of staff to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family, other noble families, who'd been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and judgment, are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. That's super interesting. Then king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years and then they would enter the royal service. It describes who they are: Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission to not eat those unacceptable foods. The chief of staff said, "I'm afraid of the Lord my king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youths, I'm afraid the king will have me beheaded." Daniel spoke with the attendant who had been appointed and said, "Please test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water. At the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to the other young men. Then make your decision." He agreed. At the end of the 10 days, this is verse 15, at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. After that, the attendant gave them vegetables instead of their own food and wine provided for others. God gave these 4 men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meaning of visions and dreams. So, just some context, right? There are the people of Israel, and they're going through the whole cycles. You can read about them in the book of Kings and Chronicles, where they start to obey God, everything's going well, then they disobey God, things aren't going so well, then they come back, they repent, and there's all these cycles and cycles and cycles. At the end of the story, God gets sick of the cycles. And God actually proves himself faithful in this moment to his promises. And he takes them away from Jerusalem, from their own country, from their temple, and he takes them to Babylon. Do you see what I just did there? Do you see what I just said there? God is faithful to his promises and takes them away into captivity. When you think about God being faithful to his promises, what do you think about? If you're like most of us, you think, oh, that means things are going to go really well. That means God's going to bless me. He's going to give me this. He's going to give me that. Things are going to go well for me. God is going to be faithful to his promises. Here's the thing. He had promised the people of Israel that if they kept messing up, he was going to take them away into captivity, away from Jerusalem, away from the temple, away from their family, their friends. They were going to be taken away. God actually proves himself faithful to his promise. Interesting. Along with that, of course, we see the Babylonians are really happy with themselves. They have taken away the articles from the temple, all the holy bits of the temple that the people of Israel had. They had taken all the things that they used for sacrifices, and they brought them and they took them into their own God's temple. So the PR of Babylon is ramping up. Look at how amazing we are. We have taken away the God of Israel's stuff. We have put them into our own temple, and nothing bad has happened to us. Look at how powerful we are. Look at how amazing we are. And think about Babylon. It was not for the people of Israel an experience that was necessarily entirely a negative experience. Babylon was like the center of the universe. It was the most livable city on the planet at that time. It was beautiful. There was art, there was literature, there was culture, there was language. And not only that, people from all over the world had come to Babylon, from every nation and tribe. And you think about Daniel and his mates, they didn't chuck him in prison. They didn't say, you're in prison, that's it, you're gone, we've taken you. No, they didn't. They actually set them up and they said, come into our culture. You're really smart, you're good looking, we're going to make you the leaders of industry. And they did. That's exactly what they did. I think about Babylon and I think it's actually a lot like the city that we all live in. It's actually a lot like Melbourne. Multicultural, wealthy, art, literature. Think about the best thing there is to living in Melbourne. It's an incredible city. It's a very livable city. Man, everything happens in Melbourne. Sydney, what have they got? Some stupid bridge, you know? Come on, guys. Melbourne is the place to be. Grand Prix this weekend, amazing. Fremantle beating North Melbourne, amazing. Football, sport, arts, culture, literature, everything is here in the city that you live in. And do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy living in this city? Do you enjoy the food? Do you enjoy the culture? Do you enjoy, we just jump on a tram and go into the city, everything works? I do. I love living here. This is an incredible place to live. The amazing thing about Melbourne, let me tell you, is that people go out and we have learned to adapt. And it's raining half the time, but we don't care. We just go out, we enjoy it, we go see a band, we go to a restaurant. This is an amazing city to live in. I think the experience of Daniel and his friends was very similar to the experience you and I have living in this city. But they make a choice, don't they? They make a choice. There is something that causes them to be distinct in the culture that they are living in. They don't take the food. They don't take the wine. There's a thing about sharing your faith, and I've got some reasons up on the screen about why we don't share our faith. And I wonder if you relate to any of these reasons. I wonder if you've ever thought these things. And to be honest, the reason I put them up there is simply so you understand that what you say in your mind is not uncommon. Like it's actually, I reckon I've said all these things, and I reckon half the people here, if not all of them, have said exactly the same thing. I'm afraid I won't do a good job. Ever thought that? I can't unpack the scriptures, I can't tell you this, that, and the other. I'm afraid that if I share my faith with someone, I'm going to do a bad job. Have you ever thought that? I'm worried I'll be rejected. Man, you've got to believe me when I say this. Wow, yes. Can you imagine? You probably played out the scenario in your mind. You rock up at a family event, you tell your brother that you're a Christian and about Jesus, and they say, just get away from it, you idiot. This is stupid. Utter stupidity. Or you go to uni and you're talking to some person and they're, some really smart academic, and you say, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, well, you're an idiot. Ever played that scenario out in your mind? I'm concerned I will fail at it. This is so important. Sharing the news about Jesus is so important. I don't want to do it because I'm afraid that I will fail at it. And I reckon that the biggest one, I don't expect God to do anything through me. Ever thought that? Does God know? Does God care? Is God's power actually at work in me? Maybe you think for yourself, I'm not a good enough Christian. I'm not good enough. I don't read my Bible enough. I'm just, and I know what I do. I know my thought life and all these other things. I just don't expect God to use someone like me to share my faith. Can I encourage you that Daniel and his friends, it wasn't so much something in the food that defiled them as much as it was a total program of assimilation. What this story in Daniel 1 teaches us is that we are absolutely here in Melbourne to enjoy everything that Melbourne has to offer. I think you should. I think you should enjoy everything that Melbourne has to offer because there's a lot here. At this point, the Babylonian government is exercising control over every aspect of their lives. They have little means to resist the forces of assimilation that are controlling them. What I mean by that is Daniel and his mates, they actually enjoyed most of what there was in Babylon to enjoy. And so much so, they rose up the ranks, they were smart, they were in government, they were in leadership, they were doing stuff in the city, they were helping that city, can you believe this? They were helping that city prosper and thrive. That's actually what they were doing. That's their model, but there was something about them that was distinct. And it was a subversive way that they lived their lives. And this is what I want to encourage you with. That's what I want to say to us all. There should be something that distinguishes you amidst the culture that we live in. What's that going to be? What is that for us? And I want to say that I actually think that John Mark Comer says this: live in such a way people are drawn to the moral beauty that is in your lives. When people see you, when they know you, when they talk to you, when you are their friends, what is the aroma that you're giving off? Do they sit there and think, this person is different? Do they say, this person has a different lifestyle to me? They're making different choices. They seem to be like faithful. They seem to be like committed and responsible. Are you the person that people feel they can trust? You're not going to gossip? You're not going to hurt them? Are you the person that someone feels they can rely upon in your friendship group? Are you the person that people say, if I need some comfort or if I need a help, then I'm going to go to this person. They are the generous person. They are the loving person. And they live differently to how I live. There should be something that is different about us. When we walk down Collins Street or wherever we walk, when we go to the footy, when we go to a gig or whatever it is we do, when we go to class, I'm not saying we should wear different clothes. That's stupid. I'm not saying we shouldn't enjoy the good things of the city that we live in. That would be dumb. But there should be something that does distinguish you, something that is gentle, something that is beautiful. There should be an aroma about you that people should be attracted to. Can you imagine? I can imagine this. I can believe this for you. That this week you pray for that person that you were just thinking of that moment before, and you say, God, can you open their eyes that they can see you within me? That they can see something different about me, and they can actually ask me the question about what it means to be a believer. Can you imagine that? I can imagine that. And I can imagine you doing it. You know, God is present and active in Babylon, even though they're away from their own place, even though they're away from the temple, even though they're away from everything and God had kept them in captivity. The story goes on in Daniel chapter 3, and I'm not going to read it all, but I'll just give you the little picture. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So he makes this massive statue. We don't actually know what it was. Was it a picture of him, or was it a picture of their god? Whatever it was, this is the incredible thing. Well, the story goes on. He sent messages to the high officers, officials, everyone that was there, all the officials to come to the dedication of the statue had set up. So all the officials came and stood before the statue. A herald shouted, listen to this. This is really interesting. People of all races and nations and languages listened to the king's command. Babylon was actually a place where people from all over the world came. Every nation, every tribe, every tongue had come to their city. Maybe in your mind you thought, oh, it was this terrible, awful place. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't awful. People had come there. They'd been attracted to it by the wealth and also by the fact that they had accepted all these people in. So it was the place to be, a lot like the city that you and I find ourselves in. But here is a moment where the people of God are going to be confronted. They're going to be asked to make a decision about their faith. They're going to be asked to stand up and say, yeah, I pledge allegiance to this. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, all these other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, listen, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worship the gold statue. Some of the astrologers, and these guys are jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They wanted their position, they wanted their power, and they're jealous. And they basically constructed this whole thing just to get them into this position. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live you, king." Stroked his ego. You issued a decree saying this: worship the gold statue whenever they hear the musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who have been put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you. They refuse to serve your gods. King Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage, ordered that they be brought to him. They were brought to him. He said to them, "Is it true that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the gold statue I set up?" I'll give you one more chance. Bow down. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their answer is really important. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you." Verse 17, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power and majesty." The next 5 words are really key just to understanding God and our relationship with God and your relationship with God. Listen to the next few words they say. He's able to rescue us, but even if he doesn't. Even if he doesn't. We want to make it clear to you, Your Majesty, we will never serve your gods or worship the god statue you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar is really angry. He makes the furnace 7 times hotter. People that are taking them there die because of the heat. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, with their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments, are thrown into the fire. Verse 24. Suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and explained to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, Your Majesty, we certainly did." "Look, Nebuchadnezzar, I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire, another in the fire, unharmed, and it looks like a god." Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." They stepped out. The high officials, the governors, the advisors crowded around them, saw the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their head was singed. Their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. This incredible emperor, this king that had conquered the known world, was confronted by the reality that you and I know is true, is that God does intervene. God does intervene. Intervene to save and to rescue his people. This is the truth of your faith. This is the gospel. This is the good news. God is active. What do I say to my friends? You tell them about how God has worked in your life. You tell them what God has done for you. You tell them about a God who is not distant. Man, I hate that phrase. God is not distant. He's a God that actually sees you, knows you, cares for you. Can you say that? Is that something you believe? Do you know that to be true? Does God actually care about you? Does God answer your prayers? Can you say that? Is that something you can share with your friend? I believe it is. Praise be, Nebuchadnezzar, his whole tune changes. Everything about him changes. Praise be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angels to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's commands and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own. I'll make this decree. He's gone from, saying how bad they were. He's seen God intervene, and then his whole tune changes. Anyone who says you can't worship their God, they're going to be thrown into the furnace. I'll make this decree. Any person, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're going to be torn limb to limb. Their houses will be turned into rubble. It's just an incredible story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are sure of God's ability. They're not so sure of his purpose. And that's the point of trust. The truth is, for you and for me, there is a lot of press, and there's going to be a lot of people that say God is not real. And there are going to be people that mock. And there are going to be people that say, well, where is God? And why doesn't he act? And I'll believe him if he does this or he does that. And it feels a bit like, the gold from our temple has been taken away and stuck in theirs. The truth is that in our society, in our culture, in the city that we live in, when we say church, when we say Christian, when we say people of God, the answers are not always answers that we would like or want. We don't always have a great reputation. What makes a difference? What helps you overcome? Come to church, worshiping together, hearing the other voices sing. It's so good for your soul. It strengthens you, it fills you up, it gets you ready for the week ahead. It reminds you once again that God is real and that you do truly believe in Jesus. Can I leave you just with two practical ideas or two practical thoughts? Firstly, I'll put them together. Be hospitable and be enthusiastic. Do you know the power of inviting someone into your home, going out with someone, going down the pub, having a meal, going to see a band together? That's all hospitality. Inviting someone into your space, cooking them a meal, becoming their friend. There's something so powerful about sitting across the table from someone and eating together and having a drink together. There's something incredibly powerful about that, where you will be someone's friend, where you will take that relationship to the next stage. And then, when you're asked the question, you don't need to be around me for more than 5 minutes to know that there are some things that I am incredibly enthusiastic about, which, to be honest, are not that important. Over at my house right now, I'll let you in on a little secret. There's a bit of pork that's slowly turning in my barbecue, and I can sort of smell it at the corner of my nostrils. I'm thinking, I love cooking, and I love that sort of thing. I'm so enthusiastic about it. But what does it even mean? What are you enthusiastic about? What do you get passionate about? Just feel that feeling for a moment. Whatever it is, something dumb. Imagine if you could feel that same feeling when someone asks you about your faith in Jesus, the most important thing that there is. Oh, let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you about the time I had in church. Or let me tell you about when I was really down and God really helped me. Let me tell you about a time he answered a prayer. Let me tell you about what it means to know what your life is about and to know purpose. Can I tell you about that? Can I show you enthusiastically about my Lord? I take a moment because as a church, we do a stack of stuff to reach our community and we continue to do that. But actually in this room, there is so much potential and power to see people become Christians. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to pray for you.